is the Fall Business Summit for 2020, and we went virtual because of COVID. And I think that we should probably make this an option going forward. I think it's a nice addition to when we get back to our live business summits. This is put on by Best of Waseca County and the Waseca Area Chamber of Commerce. We are going to get started with our first speaker here, and it is Emily Washcovik from Yelp. If you are familiar with their app, it's widely used to review restaurants, places of hospitality. Restaurants, I would say, is probably their biggest one, but I bet Emily will correct me if I'm wrong. I use it all the time, and I think it's underutilized by Waseca businesses, Waseca County businesses, and really in southern Minnesota in general. So Emily's going to talk about what they do and how businesses can utilize their services for free. And I'm going to attempt to make her a co-host so she can use whatever she needs to use. Emily, you're on mute.
Am I good now? Sorry. I was trying to do too much at once. So can you guys see my screen that says Fast Facts? Is that what you're seeing? Okay, cool. So just because you started me there, I'll give you a quick look at our breakdown before I hop into the presentation. But this sheet, yelp.com/fact sheet, we update it quarterly when we report to Wall Street. So it's just a fun place to go if you want to see like reviewed by category, for example, or how many reviews we have. Restaurants is our highest reviewed category. We always say, you know, that makes sense because people eat 3 times a day. You hopefully only have to get, you know, your roof repaired or something like that ever so often. But home services is our second category. And that's been a big change in the past few years. Shopping and retail used to be second, but home and local came way up there. You can see beauty and fitness, health. Those are big industries for us as well. And then, you know, travel, hotel, we definitely have that content. I think an interesting thing to know about Yelp is that it is more of that local business platform as opposed to maybe like a TripAdvisor, which is going to give you more of those hotel reviews, etc. And a lot of that is because our reviewers are reviewing their hometown spots. They travel too, of course, and everyone, you know, maybe writes reviews at different times, but our core demographic of users is writing online reviews about their local community. And we'll talk about this in the presentation too, but you can see like the breakdown of reviews skews positive. We have more 5-star reviews than 1, 2, and 3 combined. And then these are just interesting demographics. I think sometimes people think of Yelp or online apps as something that like college kids use or something like that. But on our site, it really is not only a good spread, but a third of our users are over the age of 55. And then, as you guys probably know, this age range here is going to be our biggest spender for most industries, and that's 37%. Income and education too. We always kind of say, when someone comes to Yelp and searches for something, they've already decided that they're going to spend money on this. They just don't know who they're going to spend with. And so the income field especially illustrates that these are vetted searches, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the presentation, but everything I'm going to show you today is a free tool that you can use on Yelp. I've been working for Yelp and presenting on behalf of the company since 2014. So I always say that if you have a question about anything I talk about today or something I didn't talk about, feel free to ask me. I'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end, but you can also just jot down my email and shoot me a message at any time or share it with a friend or a business owner that, you know, tells you they're having issues. I'm always happy to answer emails, hop on phone calls, whatever it may be. But my goal and my role for the company is to educate business owners on the free tools available. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll set the stage a little bit with consumer behavior just to kind of give you a feel of what consumers are doing when it comes to digital. And then we'll talk about Yelp's free tools, how you can claim or create your free business page and how to complete it in a way that helps you get found. We'll talk a little bit about COVID and some new features that we've rolled out that are also free to help you communicate some important information right now. And then since I have an hour, it is an hour total, right? Okay, cool. I did put a little bit of info in here about reviews. We have plenty of time, so I'll cover a few of my best practices for reviews. And the nice thing in a lot of this information is it translates and relates to other platforms as well. So I'll mention times where maybe you would use social media to communicate a similar message, or use some of these learnings about how to complete your profile to make updates to your website, for example, to help your natural SEO. So let's talk a little bit about consumers. The biggest point I want to make here is just thinking about the concept of reviews, right? In 2020, we consult and look at reviews so often. The story I always tell is I ran the Chicago Marathon a few years ago, and I went to Amazon knowing what socks I wanted, like someone had made a recommendation for me, and I wasted like 2 or 3 hours of my life reading reviews for other like long distance running socks. And we just are conditioned to look at other feedback because we have access to it through the web. And so it's important to know that, not only are people reading or looking at reviews, maybe they heard about your business or got connected to you in another way, and they're verifying information through your online presence or online reviews. So just keep that in mind. This top stat here I just love, because if 97% of consumers are reading online reviews for businesses, that basically means like my grandma reads reviews, and she does, right? When she's ordering things online, she looks at stuff. So just kind of getting that idea in your head that it's so much a part of our day-to-day life. And by setting up your presence on our site, as well as other online listings like Google My Business or having a Facebook business page, those can help you be found more on the internet. This is an interesting slide because it just gives you perspective on social media versus Yelp. So Facebook is going to be a lot about connecting, right? I'm sure many of you maybe use that to see photos or updates on families or friends. Instagram is a big engagement site, right? There's a lot of back and forth dialogue on that platform. Google is going to be a big discovery site. And many times, depending on your industry, and you can do it now since you're on a computer, if you do a Google search for what you do in your area, Yelp is going to be one of the top natural results that appears. And so having that listing will help you show up in those Google searches, but also be on the platform where consumers go when they're ready to spend. So on our platform, they can't really get, additional information about a job or budgeting, et cetera. They are making a decision about who to spend with. They're not in that early discovery phase. So let's talk about Yelp's free tools and how you can set up your listing in a way that'll help you be found. And the one thing to point out is, for many of you, you're probably going to set it and then forget it in a sense. And what I mean by that is, by creating your profile and adding all this information when you set it up, Yelp isn't like social media in that you have to post multiple times a week or anything like that. You're really just leveraging the platform to communicate once you've set up your page. And if things change in your business, or maybe if you have seasonality to what you do, then you would log in and add new things. But it's not this constant ongoing. It's more about setting the page up now that you know how it works and how these free tools work. So even if you have claimed your page, I would recommend, hearing some of these tips about completing the profile and then logging back in and looking through your page now that you have some of that insight. So to do this, you're going to visit business.yelp.com. And when you log into your free business owner's account, you're going to see this home page here. Everyone has the ability to look at how many people have been viewing their profile, as well as other actions they've taken. For example, if they call your business, click through your website, we store all that information from the past 2 years, and it's free and accessible to everyone. So when you complete your profile and fill this stuff out, if you had a page for a while that wasn't activated by you or wasn't completed by you, and then you do these steps, you should see some big shifts here in traffic to your page, and you'll notice hopefully some more leads, whether that's a phone call, someone go to your website, etc. But when you log in, whether you're on mobile or desktop, we're going to want to go to the business information tab to start. You can see it starred there on the side. And in that business information tab, you're going to see your basic information to start. So confirm your name, address, phone number. Those things are important, right? But the most important thing here is going to be categories. So you can be in up to 3 categories on Yelp. And let's say you do multiple things. I'll just give a food example because it's easier. So let's say you're in an Italian restaurant, but you also have a bar with TVs where people could watch a game. You're going to want to be listed in Italian and sports bar because those are 2 pretty different consumers, but you can serve the needs of both of them, right? So the same is true, let's say if you're like a real estate agent and you do certain things within real estate beyond just the buying or selling, maybe if you're helping with mortgages or financing, those are additional categories you could add to your page. All right. Hours are super, super, super important. Even if you're open all the time by appointment, I really recommend putting in some hours that are, your designated customer hours, and you can still say that you take appointments. But the reason hours are important is because some users are going to search for open now or open at a specific time. So a really good example that I've experienced in the past is when I move to another city and look for a new dentist, I'm oftentimes looking for a dentist that's open in the evening hours because I can't go during the workday most of the time. And so that's how I find these people who serve, different hours. A lot of my dentists are open from like 12 to 7 as opposed to, maybe 8 or 9 to 5. So if you have that sort of offering, it's really important to put that in your hours. And also, if you're permanently, temporarily closed or have special hours right now, it's really good to indicate those and they'll appear on your page as a variation to your typical hours. All right, this further info section is probably one of the most underutilized but important areas of completing your free profile. You have keyword maximums in here, but honestly, it's a good paragraph size in each section. And when you're filling this out, you want to include keywords or phrases that describe what you do, whether that's a service you offer or something that sets you apart. And when you're thinking about what to include here, it's not like Google AdWords where you just want to list a bunch of keywords separated by commas. You do want to write it in sentence form, but think about what searches you want to be found for and how to incorporate that into your page. A cool fun fact for you here is if you go to Yelp.com and search for your industry in the area, when you first start typing in the beginning of whatever word you think might begin your customer search, you'll see suggestions based on location. So if you put Waseca or the zip code or even another city nearby where you are, you can see what the common and frequent searches for that area are. I can look at the, is it still bad, Ann, or it got better?
Yeah, it's like it just comes in a little in and out with your audio. I don't know if it's it has to do with you sitting a little closer or farther away from the computer.
Let me see. Let's see if that improves it. Is that better?
No, it's when you lean back a little bit, that's when the audio gets a little wonky.
Oh, how about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I'll try to just stay here. So when you fill this section out, just keep that in mind. And then maybe now that you know this, think about that when you look at your About section on your website, for example, because that works the same way. So the keywords and phrases that you're using online, whether it's in your profile on Yelp or your Google My Business or your Facebook description, those keywords and phrases are going to help you be found. All right. This is just, if you're referring back to these slides later, this is a nice little summary for the first step of profile completion. So just giving you a little checklist of what you're going to want to update. And then photos, they are so, so, so important, not only on our platform, but right now, photo and video is going to be one of the best ways for you to tell information about your business online. So, is that better, Ann? I'm sorry. It's better when I lean in.
Yeah, it's definitely better when you lean in.
Okay, I'll just keep leaning in then. So you'll log in the same way, business.yelp.com, whether you're on the mobile app or desktop, you'll navigate to the Photos and Videos tab. You probably already have good photos on your cell phone, just, from snapping them, whether it was in your business or when you're out on the job. So you can start there, but at the end of the day, you want to have a minimum of 10 photos that you've added to your page. And so to inspire some ideas, photos of yourself or your team are great. People love seeing the people behind the business. But then also, how can you visually show your service offerings? If you have a brick and mortar, how can you show the interior of your business or how to find your business? These are all great things that consumers want to see. And when you upload these photos, caption them, because the keywords and phrases in your captions help you appear in search as well. Another little just wrap up for you, if you're doing these slides later as you make updates to your page, you can flag photos as well. So if users upload photos to your business page that maybe are for the wrong business, or they're not, images that you want to reflect your business, you can flag them, and our flags and spams team will evaluate if we can remove them. And then updating photos. So if something isn't relevant anymore, you'll want to update it, but this is more for seasonality, I like to say. So, if you're a landscaper who does snow removal, or a real estate agent who maybe is showing safety precautions that you're taking during COVID, new images can tell that story for you. We also have an app, so just keep that in mind. I think for a lot of people, the app is a great way to turn on notifications. So if you're a service provider, we have a request a quote function that's free to use. People can send you messages. And so having that mobile app with the notifications there just kind of keeps it more accessible for you. I think all of us are used to that, as opposed to sitting down at our desktop and logging in and checking things. You can also change your hours, respond to reviews, all of that in the app. Is it better, Anne? Okay, cool. All right, COVID. So this is a really important section for two reasons. One, I'm going to show you new features on Yelp that we've rolled out to help you communicate during COVID. But as you're looking at these, thinking about them, or even updating your Yelp page later, think about these as information pieces that your customers want to know, and how else can you share this information? So maybe when you're going through and checking these different boxes, you're then thinking of Instagram posts that can tell the same story. So we want this clear, concise, and consistent message. And think about what consumers want to know. They want to know if you're open, operating, what's changed, what's different from what you used to do. And then what options do they have? If it's virtual options, if it's, a combination, maybe they're doing online ordering now, but curbside pickup, give them that brief information right up front. On our site, we have a COVID banner. So every business page is going to have this banner. It's kind of like our holiday banner, which used to remind customers like, hey, it's MLK Day, confirm that this business is open and operating normal. But now with the COVID-19 banners, they're modifiable for each business, and we really, really encourage businesses to do that. It's a very easy way to give the most important information. It's prominently displayed on the app, as you can see here, and then it's also a banner at the top of the page if you're looking on desktop. So it'll be the first thing that a consumer sees, which is really helpful. If any of you are in industries where you're doing virtual offerings, whether, that's a fitness studio doing virtual classes, or, if you're a professional service provider, so a lawyer or a real estate agent who does virtual consultations, go into your account and select that virtual button, because there are a lot of consumers searching specifically for virtual. So they might be looking for yoga classes with the virtual checkbox, and then they want to see businesses that have indicated that. So even if you have transitioned, like I know a lot of real estate agents, for example, are seeing people in person again and doing tours with masks and other precautions, that's fine, but you might still capture a customer if you're offering a virtual alternative who isn't comfortable going in person. So just think of that, and if you're open to virtual, check that box. This is an example of where those updated services are going to display. So you see that COVID banner at top, and then the updated services. And then below it, we have the health and safety measures as well, which I'll show you in 1 second here. But we're trying to put this information at the top and front and center of business pages because consumers have been searching by specific things like virtual or masks required. So we know that they want this information front and center. Health and safety measures were a really important rollout for us. Again, like I said, a lot of consumers were trying to get this information and get it from things like reviews or photos, and that wasn't the most accurate content for them. So we turned these on. They're for you to go in and select and indicate what you're doing. And the really cool thing here is, again, like I mentioned, when you're looking at this checklist, masks required, limited capacity, sanitization between customers, it'll give you a little idea of what you might promote in another way. So maybe you haven't thought to do photos of your staff in masks on Instagram because you think it makes, the like ucky feeling of masks and people not want to be out. But in fact, consumers want to see that stuff. So they want to know that when they come and patronize your business, if you're a brick and mortar, for example, that they're going to feel safe. And of course, there are a group of people who, don't want to wear masks and aren't happy about that. So that's another great reason, if you are enforcing that, for example, to communicate it forwardly. And I know that that's been a big challenge on both ends for business owners. So just a lot of, empathy towards you guys. I know it's been a crazy few months in many, many ways, but that has been a pretty tricky thing for a lot of businesses around here. And I know that's been something that they've struggled with. So it's hard, man. 2020 is crazy. But here's where the health and safety measures are visually displayed. So last note here is about brick and mortars again. We've seen a lot of really cool and unique things with protective barriers, whether they're homemade like on the right or a rearrangement of things you already had in your business on the left. When you're creating these spaces, when you're doing all this extra work to make your customers feel comfortable, take that one extra step and upload a photo about it to Yelp, put it on your social media. Maybe if you're sending a newsletter, incorporate images in it so that your customers can see what to expect and get excited about returning to your business. This is just another great example here. Little note to myself of how to promote safety features on Instagram, for example. So this was a story that a fitness studio put on their Instagram, and it really, really gave a huge influx to their online bookings when they reopened. So they had been closed for upwards of 70 days, and they promoted about a week before they reopened what safety precautions were going to be. They opened up spaces for each class and had you pre-book, and they were booked out in advance. Obviously, they had far less availability in each class because of the spacing, but by proactively communicating these safety measures, they brought a lot of people to schedule their spot in advance, and they were able to really get that operation going faster. Oh, great. We've got plenty of time. Reviews. So a really important thing, whether it's on our platform or any other online review software platform, customers want to see responses. And the biggest thing about this is they want engagement with businesses, right? 53% of them expect to receive a review response. And that's actually not a Yelp stat. That comes from a guy named Jay Baer. And if you've never heard of him or read his book, he has a book called Hug Your Haters. And if you like to read, or if you're looking for something to, focus or guide your customer service as you go into 2021 and figure out how to navigate, it's a great read. And it just talks about how to engage, whether it's on or offline, in a way that creates a connection to your customers and ultimately creates these loyal fans based on your activity. So I know we looked at this on the first site, but essentially what we want to see here is getting over that hump of fear about negative reviews. So I know a lot of businesses choose not to engage in their digital reviews because they're afraid it's just a bunch of negative Nancy's or people complaining. And on our platform, in fact, more people are writing 5-star reviews than 1, 2, and 3-star reviews combined. And the real, thing to take away there is most people are recommending or referring great experiences. And I think, when you're doing enough volume, you're certainly going to see a negative review or here and there in your lifetime. So don't put too much weight there, but also don't avoid a platform, whether it's ours or another review platform, because you're afraid of that negative, because there's so much more opportunity right here on the positive end that can help your business. And there is some constructive stuff that can come out of the negative end, depending on the reviewer and what the feedback is. So here, you can analyze and identify themes or trends, whether that's positive things or getting feedback about something that's going wrong. And I was in the hotel industry before I was working for Yelp, and I was a front office manager of a Marriott. I was at the hotel a lot, but I wasn't there all the time, and reviews would give me so much insight into what was happening when I was gone and if things were at the same standard as while I was there. And so while it is hard sometimes to get feedback, especially if you have a handful of employees, feedback can be really helpful, and accepting that sometimes we're human and we're going to make mistakes, and a lot of negative reviews are just a miss between expectation and reality. I think we can not only learn a lot, but also move forward in a way where those reviews are helping grow our business and our brand. This is really important to me. 89% of consumers read businesses' response to reviews. And the reason this is important to me is because at the end of the day, when you're responding to a reviewer, you're not responding to necessarily win that reviewer over. You're responding to reflect your customer service practices in general. So really to show who you are as a brand. And if we all think of those big brands that we know and trust and have all this credibility in, they're the ones who always respond or make things right. I always think of LL Bean. I don't know, when I was a kid, my mom always got us stuff from LL Bean because it was such high quality. So our snow pants, our jackets, that kind of stuff. But also if something happened, you literally just go to LL Bean and they replace it. Like, it's no questions asked, lifelong products. And because of that, people choose to spend there. And so that same ability is available for you to display your customer service practices. So using reviews as a way to reflect who you are and just one more level of trust you can build is really great. And it's strategic too. So responding to reviews not only is good to help your brand, but it actually influences the feedback you're getting. So on average, businesses who respond have a higher rating, they receive more reviews, and they're going to see more views and leads off of their page. And the psychology behind that makes sense, right? It's like, if I know as a consumer when I'm looking at your business that you read and respond to reviews, and then I go experience your business for myself, I'm far more likely to share my experience because I know it matters to you. I know it's going to have some sort of an impact. So here's Jay Baer. I'm glad I tossed this in here so you guys can reference it if you are hoping to grab this book. It really is a great read. I read it when I was in the hospitality industry, but it applies to Yelp, and it applies to honestly all digital areas where you can get feedback and engage with your customers in a meaningful way. All right, so let's break down review response and how to strategically do it. I'm going to start with critical because that's what everyone's the most afraid of. But remember, these are what we're dealing with far less than positive reviews, okay? On Yelp's platform, we have two options when it comes to responding: public comments and direct messages. Public comments are going to be displayed right under the review on the front of your Yelp page. So this is that strategic response, right? We are responding to the reviewer, but we're not necessarily responding for the reviewer. We would love to talk to that reviewer and maybe see what happened or get a little bit more insight, but that's not ultimately the goal. We're using that public comment to reflect customer service. So, okay, legitimate reviews, right? If someone has an experience and it isn't up to snuff, or, maybe something happened. I'm actually launching a podcast right now featuring stories about reviewers and business owners. And we've had a few in the past week that have been negative reviews. And some of the times it's like something just happened, a plumber went to a call and was unable to assess the issue, or they said they had a part but they didn't have it and they had to come back later. Like, things happen. There are times where a review is legitimate, and a public comment is a great way to show that that is abnormal for your practices. So when you respond to that, maybe thank the reviewer for their feedback, address something they say, but then take that conversation offline. So either say that you sent them a direct message or give them a way to get in touch with you to chat further. And again, it's just extending an open arm of communication to that person, but really more so reflecting that you're responding, and that if there are issues, you want them brought to you. Responding to reviews is also going to help more of that negative feedback come directly to you as opposed to being posted on the page, because if they see that you're going to reach out, oftentimes they'll just try to get in touch directly. Inaccurate reviews. So sometimes this is the case because they're experienced, but sometimes it's an accident, right? Like I've seen plenty of times where someone describes the deal they got, whether it was a happy hour or maybe some sort of like free assessment with a tax provider or something like that. And if you need to correct that information, you can do that in a public comment. That's a great way to do that. I think it's important to know, though, that I have a bucket of reviews that maybe you're either not going to respond to or you're going to respond in a direct message. I preach public comment all the time, and I think that that's the best route 99% of the time on our platform and on any other platform. If you have a chance, use that public comment. But then direct message, sometimes we'll have a negative Nancy, right? I mean, sometimes your business just happens to get in between someone else and their bad day. So the first thing you want to do is click on their username. You'll be able to see their whole Yelp profile and a breakdown of all the reviews they've written. If this person is skewing negative and always writes 1-star reviews, maybe this is a chance to just send a direct message or to just skip that one. And I think you have to kind of make that decision for yourself. But remember, consumers are smart. And so they'll see outlier negative reviews on a page as well. And they'll identify that that person is, like I mentioned, a negative Nancy. Okay, let's talk about positive reviews. The really cool thing about positive reviews is they can help you not only be found more often, but in a few other ways. And I like to call it, just free word of mouth marketing, essentially. So if you get a great positive review that has information about a service you want to highlight, or just really hits the nail on the head for everything you want to present your business as, use that public comment not only to thank them, but to reiterate some of those things, because the keywords and phrases that you include in your comments help you appear more in search. The nothing to add category here is especially if you're in a high volume industry. So if you're a restaurant manager, for example, and you're dealing with tons of reviews every week, maybe you don't have time to write a personalized sentence or two. Maybe you're sending the same exact thank you message every time. In that case, use a direct message. It just helps to make you look not so canned on the front of your account. It makes you look a little bit more personable and like you're responding to each review on its own. And then amplify the positivity. So share those reviews, whether it's a review of the week or review of the month on social media, or if you have a tab on your website for, reviews or feedback. Any way that you can push and promote that you read and engage with these reviews will be a great way to not only spread the word, but engage more people to share their experiences. And that's definitely what you want to do is, let people know you pay attention to reviews and link all the platforms that you're present, for example. But on Yelp specifically, you don't want to be asking for or soliciting reviews. We take a really firm stance on that for two reasons. One, we think it creates innate bias. And the thing that I always talk about is, if you can remember, it's been months now since I've been in an Uber or a Lyft ride, but you're having a good conversation with someone, maybe you're, chatting it up for a few minutes and you go to get out of the ride and the driver's like, can you give me 5 stars, please? And it's just it's weird and uncomfortable, and you're just like trying to get your stuff and get out of the back of the car. And it's the same sort of thing when you're, begging or trying to do this, really like strong-armed requests for reviews. And I have heard a lot of stories, movers, for example, kind of tend to get a bad rap of almost like holding your stuff hostage at the end before they drop off, or, the contract or whatever, asking for them to leave feedback before they wrap up the transaction. And so it's just not the greatest experience for the consumer. Again, we also think it creates innate bias. So on our site, it's best to not ask for reviews. We have a review recommendation software, and it works to recommend the most reliable and trustworthy reviews. So it'll look at a ton of signals, everything we know about the reviewer, the action they've taken on our site, the review itself, so the contents of it, and other things like where the review came from. So I always tell the story about one of my car wash friends. He has a multi-location car wash business in Los Angeles, and he used to have iPads right by where you would check out. So you hand the car over to the guys, they start doing your in and out wash, you go in and pay. And at the end, there's an iPad, you can fill out a review. He obviously wasn't trying to do anything wrong. He was just giving them an easier ability to leave their feedback. But on the platform, it looked like every single review was coming from the same IP address. So what's the difference to the software between that guy sitting in his office and writing, 5-10 reviews a day, or actual customers writing them? It couldn't tell the difference. So those reviews were getting not recommended. And it was really, really frustrating for the business owner. So just don't do it. It's frustrating for you. But I should point out that there are other platforms that allow you to ask for reviews and encourage it or give you resources to do it. Google is a great example. So do that for other platforms if that's what you want to do. But on ours, you're going to get frustrated because the algorithm will start to work against you. So a better way to do that is share reviews on social, put links to all of your platforms on your website, in your email signature. And if you have a physical business or if you're a service provider, there are other fun ways I've seen people share reviews as well, whether it's a wall in your brick and mortar that has all your favorite reviews displayed, or a truck for, your business that has your favorite review on the side of it. We've seen a lot of businesses get really, really creative. Here's some great examples for you. And the last note here when it comes to reviews is just remembering that as the business, we want to be the professional one in this exchange, right? So if you get a negative review and you're really, really frustrated or upset and you want to log on and respond while you're angry, just take a minute, step away. Maybe bring someone else in to help you decide how to respond or to read over your response before you post it. But the most important thing is you want to be the one that comes out of that exchange looking professional, as opposed to putting yourself at risk of, validating that review, depending on what it was. And then take comfort in knowing that you can't please 100% of your customers 100% of the time. I always talk about volume when it comes to negative reviews. If you're doing enough business, you've been around a while, you're getting tons of reviews, you're going to just deal with those negatives over time. It's going to happen with sheer numbers. But I have a very close friend of mine who always says and reminds other business owners that perfect 5-star pages are oftentimes a little bit wary, or they don't look authentic. Sometimes those critical reviews, whether it's a 1-star, 2-star, 4-star, can give a little bit of authenticity and trust to that listing. And then the last thing I wanted to point to here before we get to Q&A is additional resources. So obviously you guys will get these slides, it's being recorded, so you can come back and follow these steps. But we also have a business owner's blog, and that has a ton of content on it. Some of the links are free Yelp tools like we talked about today. Some of them are about responding to reviews. Some of them have nothing to do with Yelp at all. How to write a business plan, how to create an SEO strategy, tons of different articles. So if you're looking for more content or education, or if you're looking for specific resources on Yelp, check out the blog. It's a really, really great resource. And then I wanted to throw my email up again, so you can jot that down if you're uncomfortable asking a question live today, or if something comes up a week from now, a month from now, you can reach out to me. But that is what I prepared. Look at that, 20 minutes left for Q&A. I hope the sound got better. I'm so sorry about that. There's nothing worse than listening to bad sound.
It did. It got a lot better. Appreciate you leaning in like that. I had a question that someone submitted that couldn't make it today. Now you mentioned you can flag photos that you don't want on there. Can you flag reviews?
You can. So you can flag any review that you want. I always recommend you flag from your business owner's account. So logging into business.yelp.com first and then flagging. You can flag from your user account, like if you use Yelp as a consumer, but it's more effective from your business owner account, and you'll get a response from our team about whether the review is going to be removed or not. So we have terms of service and content guidelines. There's a number of reasons you could flag a review to be removed, but a few common ones are former employee or person affiliated with the business who's writing negative reviews, for example. It's not a firsthand consumer experience. So that happens sometimes where they're writing a review, but they aren't writing about a consumer experience. So yeah, if you have reviews like that, you can flag them. It'll ask you to give one of the reasons. There's a drop-down tab for you. And then you'll hear back from the team in 1 to 3 business days about what they're going to do. We also have a second evaluation form. So if for whatever reason you hear back, they're not going to remove the review and you think that it's wrong, you think it does go against terms of service, can fill out that second flag form, and a separate person on the flags and spams team will evaluate it. If all that is not making any sense and you need that information from me, just email me and I can send you the steps to flag and the form.
Yeah, anyone else can take themselves off mute if they have a question for Emily. I have like 37 things I'd love to discuss because I'm an avid Yelp user, so I do love it. And she's right, posting pictures works. I mean, just on my little user account, the photos that I've put on Yelp have been viewed over 10,000 times in the last 30 days. And it's not like I'm some super user of Yelp. It's that it works. So yeah, she'd love to field any questions from anyone. Because we've got...
It can be about stuff I didn't talk to today too, if you have questions. Or questions about social media, like digital marketing, reviews, anything. I'm happy to help. And if you're in a certain industry maybe and you want to just for a minute or two hear if I've seen any unique things or have advice for a certain industry, let me know.
And this is Jim Borbum. And Emily, I would have a question. How about nonprofits? Do you have some examples of nonprofits that use Yelp, and how are they either using the tool, or what kind of experience are they having?
Yeah, great question, Jim. Nonprofit is a pretty big segment of listings on our site. So we have a nonprofit category, and then we have a few additional categories as well within nonprofits, so specific types. I would say the biggest thing to note when you're a nonprofit is that your listing in many ways is just about it being complete. You're probably not going to deal with a lot of review content. You're in one of those categories that probably isn't going to get a high frequency of reviews, but the listing can be so useful in other ways. So I would recommend either claiming the page, you might already have one, so just check first, or creating it and then completing it to fill out that specialty section, history, and really describe what the mission of the nonprofit is through those keywords and those images. And then the help that it'll give you is, let's say, for example, someone's Googling reading, like children's reading nonprofit Minnesota or something. Not only will your website hopefully show up, but your Yelp page now will have that good SEO value for you. And because Yelp as a site has good SEO value, that listing is just going to have a little bit more weight on the web than your own website, for example. So just having that accurate listing completed, most important with some images and some context to what specifically the nonprofit does, would be extremely helpful.
Hey, Emily, this is Doug Legault with United Parade Bank. What do you see for Yelp pages on banks and financial institutions? How should we use that versus Facebook and all the other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think especially for the more independent localized banks as well as credit unions, you're going to see not only a lot of people maybe searching specifically for those types of things, but also just as a directory. I think it can be helpful when people are searching for like an ATM or, you know, something of that nature. So again, you're kind of in the same realm of nonprofits in the sense of probably not dealing with a lot of high volume of reviews. Not a lot of people like leave the bank after they deposit a check and like think about reviewing it, of course. But in your industry, you have the advantage of being able to do things like table tents in the bank or those types of things to get engagement if you were trying to push that. But I think at a bare minimum, it's all about that profile completeness and leveraging our platform to give you visibility as an option. So yeah, it's not going to be a high volume review industry, but again, I think that online listing, that digital presence, and for Yelp data is being pulled into Apple Maps, Yahoo, Bing, the GPS system for basically every vehicle. So if someone is, again, looking for that ATM or looking for a new bank locally and they care about certain offerings that are maybe going to be different than a Chase, for example, those are the types of things that you could incorporate. And then also just leveraging it for the ability to have your address, your phone number, that website accurate. Does that answer your question?
Yep. So that would be like when we're going down the road and I want ice cream near me. If they put, I want banks near me, with Yelp getting on that will pull that back up as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. Yep. No, great. Thank you for the help.
Of course. And if any of you guys are setting up your pages or claiming them and you fill them out and then you're like, okay, I wonder if I did this right, just shoot me an email with the link. I'll look at it and I'll send you back some notes or resources if I think you could change or add something. I'm always happy to do that.
Hi, Emily. This is Penny Vogt. I don't own a business, but I am a consumer, and I'm going to try and find Anne's comments because she always writes witty comments on her reviews. And I guess mine is more of just, you know, I use Yelp for reviews and also for reservations.
Sure.
And there's a lot of negativity out there on social media platforms. And I guess as a business or as a consumer, I know you can flag, but is there anything else a business or a consumer? Because I always look at the intent, and I think there are former employees who try and, you know, hurt businesses.
Totally.
So is there anything else besides flagging that can be done?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you as a user can flag things too. So if you ever get that sense that something should be flagged, feel free to do that. But I think an important thing to note is you can flag users as well. So sometimes when we have these bad actors, we call them, they're not just going after one business, right? Like they kind of have a little bit of a pattern. So on Yelp in particular, when you click on any reviewer's name, you can see their full profile, all their reviews, and you can flag them there. That will send an alert to our flags and spams teams, and they'll take a look at that full profile and really be able to decide what to do. And a lot of times their first action is reaching out, and reprimand is the wrong word, but in many ways it's like a slap on the wrist and a re-explanation of our terms of service, content guidelines, and what they should be doing. So that can be like the tattletale route a little bit. If you feel like you're seeing something that should be brought to our attention, that's a way to do it as well. You know, I think beyond that, it gets pretty tricky, and that's where we kind of need to leave the negative Nancy's and allow that consumer brain that we know so many consumers have to operate, and we kind of have to navigate around that. That is the one downside of the internet, you know, and we get it too. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but obviously not every business owner likes Yelp. I mean, there's some contention there. And on our social media, when we post things, you should see some of the comments. I mean, there are business owners who really, really do not like us. And It's hard. We kind of take the stance that we don't go and respond to every single one because of our volume and the inability to have like an impact in some of those. But I think as a consumer, you know, if you see someone, you can even send them a message. I don't know that it would work, but if you have those few minutes and you feel so compelled because you care about the business you're seeing them write to or whatnot, you could even send them a message like, I'm not a business owner, but this review doesn't seem fair. I don't know. I think that's kind of one more step of you being like a valiant consumer, but you do have the ability to message or send them a note, but that is the one downside. I do get, you know, hopeful though with the fact that on our platform, it really is so skewed on the positive, but you know, there are those negative experiences. In the whole time I've been at the company though, and it's going to be my 6 years next week, I haven't seen those ratios change very much. Like that's been pretty cool to see. And I think a lot of that is because of the algorithm and the software as well. Some of those over the top negative reviews that aren't authentic, they get removed. So we don't have this big slew of inaccurate negativity, but there is still, I think it's 13% or something like that that are 1 star. So still have to deal with those every now and again.
Thanks, that's good information. And I have backed up a couple times when I've seen it, and it's been on Facebook where people have just tried to sabotage a business and it's just totally untrue. Or maybe like you said, they're having one bad day. Don't judge people by just one bad day. So, but I do,
Yeah.
I do love your passion.
Oh, thank you. The interesting thing about one bad day is like, so I learn so much from business owners when they share these life experiences with me, but I have a friend I met, she was a marketing director for a multi-restaurant group in Chicago. And she said they got this one negative review and she was just so confused. It seemed like detailed and accurate, but she knew it wasn't like true. And she kind of went down the wormhole of looking at this woman's Yelp account. And she noticed that in the past like 2 to 3 months, she had written all these negative reviews. And when she got to the end of this thread of all these negative reviews, the first one was a review for a hospice center and her mom had passed away. So she lost her mom. And then all of these business engagements she had for the next few months obviously were overtoned with other things in her life. It wasn't really so much about those businesses, but about what she was going through. And you know, not that that helped, the negative review is still there, but my friend was able to respond with a little bit more grace. And, you know, that's a bummer, but again, it is the few and far between compared to the people who are actively writing to celebrate the great experiences that they have. And Anne, I'm like so thrilled that you're such an avid reviewer. I didn't know that. You probably have told me that and I forgot, but that's so cool.
I'm an elite Yelper, no big deal.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's
It's
so
really,
cool.
it's honestly, I think anybody can become an elite Yelper. I don't think it's.
Well, if you're writing enough reviews, but that takes time. I mean,
Well,
writing reviews takes time.
It does, and I started writing reviews and being a user of Yelp because I got disappointed at some restaurants that were maybe on like diners, drive-ins, and dives, and they made it sound really good, and I get there and it's not that great. And just for reference, if anyone's in Philadelphia, do not go to Pat's or Gino's. They're tourist traps. Go to Tony Luke's or Delissando's. I mean, that was such a learning experience going to these places you see on TV and being disappointed is a bummer. So I started doing reviews.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to connect with you because this podcast we're doing, the hardest part is finding the reviewers. So maybe I'll just do a dig through all your reviews and see if there's some cool businesses in there we could do.
Awesome. Well, does anybody else have any other questions for Emily? And luckily she gave everybody her email address so we can all ask her questions offline too. So that's very nice.
Yes, please feel free to message me.
All right, then we are going to let Emily go.
Sounds
And
good.
Thanks, Emily.
thank you so much. This was really cool.
Thank you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You
Thanks,
too.
you too.
Bye. All right. I thought that was really informative because I know there's a lot of businesses in the Waseca area that don't use Yelp because they are afraid of those negative reviews and how to handle them. So I felt like that was kind of reassuring.
Yep, and for people that maybe don't know how to use, that are afraid because they don't know how to use it, like us for the bank, it's another nice tool to have. Had no idea how we could ever use it. So,
Right. Doug, our next guy is Bruce here. Is Bruce in yet?
I don't recognize his number. Let me mute and I'll give him a call quick to see if he's available.
Sure. Well, I think earlier I said that we weren't going to go around and introduce ourselves. We have a little bit of time, so I think we'll do that because there is a couple people that I don't recognize their numbers. So everybody can, if they'd like, they can unmute and turn on their cameras, please.
Oh, my hair is sticking up.
Looks fantastic, Penny. I'm Ann Fitch, the director of the Waseca Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm so bad at introducing myself with this stuff because my ego is just so big. I assume everyone knows me. So, Jim, we'll have you go, and I'll just call your name, and I'll go down my list here.
Well, good morning, everyone. Jim Borbum. I'm a board member of Best of Waseca. Retired 4 years ago after a 21-year career with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Penny Vote.
Hi, everybody. My name is Penny Vote. I'm a member of the BEST board, and I have been in Waseca almost 37 years, and I'm currently the Director of Public Safety and the Chief of Police.
Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Hoffman. I'm on the BEST board and retired.
That's a good place to be.
Very good.
Lee.
I'm Lee Mattson. I'm the city manager. I'm currently in year 3 here in Waseca.
Marcy.
I'm Marcy Bupley, and I'm with United Prairie Bank.
Sarah.
I am Sarah Duck. I apologize, my camera is not working on my computer right now. But I am with Visiting Angels in the Mankato office.
Awesome. Teresa.
Oh, Teresa Sunday, Senior Manager of Government Relations for MediaCom Communications. I oversee 4 states. Waseca is in my community. I am part of the Chamber Ambassadors and also a member of the BEST board.
Let's see here. Jim Gibson.
Hello, yes, Jim Gibson, former chair of the BEST board. I'm very pleased and Doug with this event today. It's a great service that is being provided.
Thank you. Tim.
Hi, Tim Wenzel. Can you hear me?
Tim Wenzel. Hey, Tim Wenzel.
I'm Winnigers down here in the south side of town trying to do 3 things at once. So mostly here to listen in, but
Perfect.
I'll be popping in and out. So
Happy to have you. Jessica Rollins.
Okay, head on mute. Jessica Rollins, the Executive Director at Farm America. This is like my 4-year anniversary here in October. So happy to be on the call today.
Awesome. Matt Petzinger. Well, he might be with a client. And Mark L. And then there's one phone number that I don't recognize. So if you're calling in, feel free to chime in if you'd like. But if you don't, that's okay. We're going to have everyone else remute. And Doug is going to introduce our next guest. Because I see that Bruce logged on.
He did.
Yeah, I see Bruce McKirdy in there.
I'm here.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
I couldn't see your picture on the board here.
Oh no, yeah, I got to hear the introductions and it sounds like a fun group. So
Yes, thank you, Bruce. Bruce is the general manager at Radio Mankato here in Mankato. Bruce is going to do a little hour presentation on podcasts, kind of how they can be used, how they are used, and how businesses can make them part of maybe their advertising or their information. So Bruce, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Go ahead and do your thing.
Okay. Well, let me give you a quick update. I mean, I've been in radio for 37 years. Radio, in my mind, got turned, they changed the definition of it. Most people think of it as that box that's in your car and you turn the little knobs, and that's not radio. Radio is audio on demand, delivered in a variety of fashions that may be ephemeral, like what you would think a radio station is, or it may be something that is very simple, like a podcast. So let's start out with, I want to do overviews. And by the way, can I get a quick heads up? Are you guys interested in creating podcasts or listening to podcasts?
Creating.
Okay, good, because that's most of what I did. I mean, I wanted to make sure that we're on. So I want to start with 3 key areas: audience, content, and then mechanics. Monetization we'll touch on briefly, but you'll find out that the monetization part of it is problematic. But let's start with audience. The audience is the who, the when, and the where. The content, meaning the what are we going to actually talk about, and the mechanics of how do we get this done. So if you look at some research from Edison Research and Triton, they basically are telling you some things. The average person listens to about 4 hours of audio every single day. 4 hours. Of those, podcasting is only a 4% share. TV music, like like on your cable system where it plays, that's about 5%. XM radio is 8%. Owned music is 14%. Streaming audio is 16%. 50% is the radio. And keep in mind, 93% of people listen to the radio on a weekly basis. I am starting to find more and more that these things are not, it's not this or that. We are living in a this and that economy, which is one of the reasons Radio Mankato has started to produce our own podcasts, use them as both playback and then also as something that can be found later. So just know that it's a small share of ear at this point in time, but it is growing and growing quickly. The people who do listen to podcasts, though, the ones who have already picked up on it, they spend about 33% of their time with podcasts. They really, really like podcasts. So you have a loyal listenership, even though it is still at this point kind of small. If you look at the trends, about 44% of the population has listened to a podcast at one point in time. That's about 127 million people. In other words, they have tried it. About 26% listen on a monthly basis. About 17% listen on a weekly basis. However, this is the interesting part. So as I said, 44% of people of the population have listened to a podcast. 64% of people are aware of the term podcasting. When there's awareness, that tends to move people more towards doing it. I mean, podcasting basically it came from the term iPod and broadcasting combined, podcasting, that you could listen to a broadcast later at a different time. So as people little by little are becoming more familiar with it, they're going to try things out. They're going to hear about it. They go, well, that sounds interesting. I want to know. So let's talk more about audience. Keep in mind, this is pure form audio on demand. You can listen at any given time. There are currently about 1.5 million podcasts to choose from. So it's a very crowded marketplace. However, and within that, by the way, there are 34 million episodes. Know that of those 34 million episodes, 1.5 million podcasts, comedy is the #1 genre. I mean, people like to laugh. Funny works. I mean, and it might be that you approach a serious subject in a funny way. We'll talk more about that when we get to content. But if you look at the listenership, it leans a little bit male. About 52% of men and 48% of women is the current makeup of the market. 75% of the podcasts are listened to on a smartphone. So when you're designing things, whether it be your graphics, your whatever, you're just make sure you understand that most of the people who are listening are going to be listening on their smartphone. Number one place it is consumed, however, is at home, 48%. So it's interesting that you have these people who you would think at home maybe they hook it to a speaker, maybe they have their Alexa or Google device, and those things are coming along and becoming more podcast friendly as well. So those kinds of things will grow. 19% of people are increasing the speed of your podcast to consume it faster. That's keep in mind that when you're doing your podcast, sometimes people want it faster. I mean, and if you want to know what that person looks like, that's me. I do that. I turn it up to 1.25. I want it faster so I can consume it in a little bit faster fashion. Audience of a podcast may not be large, but keep in mind these regular listeners are going to look to you for advice and entertainment. So that's kind of the audience, the who, the when, the where. Do we have any questions on that? Just rather than treat this like a speech, I'd rather just kind of treat it as an interaction. Do you have any questions so far along the way? Clarification?
Hey, Bruce, I do. I have one quick one. You talked about some age demographics. The 33% on the podcast, is that 19 to 25? Is it middle age? What's the dem?
18 or 12 to dead. For that demographic. However, if you look at podcasting as a whole, 12 to 54 is the primary. That's where most of the listening is happening. There is some in the 55 plus, but it does drop off significantly after that. And my suspicion is it has to do with not the desire to listen, but the ability to deal with technology. There are some people, my dad is 91 years old. He is the most amazing guy. He lives up in North Dakota at the Veterans Home. And the last time I went up to visit, which was actually last year, I haven't seen him all year because of the lockdowns, but he has a brand new laptop. I said, Dad, you running Windows 10? He goes, well, I didn't want to get behind. Some people adapt. He's always been an early adapter. There are going to be those people, but there is a certain number of people, once you get past a certain threshold, and it appears, at least according to the statistics I've been looking at, that once you get to that 55, they just are not adapting as quickly. That doesn't mean that they won't catch up later as it becomes, because somebody will find an easier way to make this happen. My guess would be the smart speakers. Because if you could just say to your smart speaker, hey, Alexa, play me a podcast, and then she gives you your 1.5 million choices, chances are it will be easier for an older audience to consume. So does that help, Doug?
Yep, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
Bruce, I have a question. You said you produce podcasts right there. So do you do that for just Radio Mankato content, or let's say the Pleasant Grove Pizza Farm from Waseca wanted to have a podcast? Could they come over and do that for a fee?
We are currently not selling studio time. And right now it's problematic because of COVID. We don't even allow, now that said, that doesn't mean no. Am I open to that idea later? That the studio time would become that piece with which we sell. We're actually experimenting with it. And I'll get into this more when we get to content, which actually is the next segment, but we're producing things that are interesting to a local audience, putting it on the radio, and then posting it online. I believe, by the way, that we are not in a this or that economy. When people start talking about advertising, which is kind of where you wanted this to, I think people tend to think, well, I'll do podcasting, or I'll do social media, or I'll do billboards, or I'll do radio, or I'll do whatever you want to do. And I would suggest it isn't this or this or this. It is this and this, and this, and this, and everything needs to match. I was sitting in McDonald's one day, years ago, and I'm eating my lunch by myself, And this old guy walks up and he sits down with me. And he says, I'll sit with you, young man. And this happens far more than I would like to actually admit. Sorry. Anyway, and he says, well, what do you do, young man? I said, well, I work for a radio station. Oh, I used to be the brand manager for all of Wells Fargo. I said, what? He goes, do you know what a brand is? I said, I don't care what my definition is. What's yours? And he looked at me and he said, decide who you're going to be and then be that. Decide who you're going to be in a podcast and then be that. But that should also match your website, should also match your billboards, also match your social media, also match your radio, your television, your whatever you're going to do. Decide who you're going to be and then be that. And I think that's one of the reasons that advertising fails, is because we try to pit them against each other or try to make them do different things. Now understand, each media has a strong point and a weak point. So for example, radio or podcasting is going to be great at capturing people, but very poor at conveying information. Graphics, and I mean that there's a website is an amazing place to have all your details, all your statistics. I mean, if I went back to you right now, I just rattled off a whole page of statistics. How many people listen on a monthly basis? Anybody? What percentage? Come on, it's only been 12 minutes. You can't remember. The brain can't hold on to it. It was 26%, by the way. Listen to podcasts on a monthly basis. Your brain is not capable of absorbing all of this. By the way, they've done studies on this. A guy named Ebbinghaus back in 1895 did this study, and he found out that only 4% in a month, in 4 short weeks, you will only remember 4% of what was said here. Sorry. Which is also one of the reasons it's important to stay in front of people and to keep talking to people, whether it's with a podcast, whether it's with your standard advertising, just staying at things. So any other questions before I go on from all of those statistics? Okay, let's talk content. Radio is a regulated industry. Television is a regulated industry. Internet, to some extent, is a little bit regulated. There's some things you can do. There's some things you can't. Keep in mind, podcasts are an unregulated industry at this point. It's free of all government oversight. You can talk about any subject. You can use 4-letter words. You can be explicit. I'm not suggesting you do any of these things. I'm just telling you, here's what's possible. I personally don't believe it's wise or necessary, but on the other hand, everybody's got their own thing. So you can talk about virtually anything you want when you do a podcast. Now, keep in mind that while government oversight is not here yet, copyright law does apply. Meaning, if you're using a song, let's say I wanted to use, just pick any classic rock song, The Doors, and I put The Doors under my music bed, I'm going to get sued, and it's a lawsuit I cannot win. They own the copyright to that song. I cannot use it, period. And by the way, there are a lot of board lawyers who listen to a variety of different things while sitting around their house. And when they realize somebody has done copyright infringement, they simply contact you with a cease and desist letter. I've had this happen one time in my life. It was an awful experience. And it was fortunately for a nonprofit organization. And this would have been right at the cusp of when all of this was beginning, when they really started to ratchet down. So that would have been early 90s. I would really encourage you play by all the rules. In addition, you can't use pictures that don't belong to you when you upload it to the website. Now you can get free copyrighted music, you can get free music, you can get free graphics, all of those things, but do keep in mind, whatever you're uploading, copyright applies. You can't use, like if you're doing something on comedy, you can't use other people's comedy bits in your podcast. That belongs to them. You can't use other people's music. You can't take their speech and redo it. You've got to create your own. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Copyright does allow you, for example, to use under 60 seconds of things. You know, if it's a matter of I'm just going to put on a half an hour of somebody else's stuff and call it mine and then monetize it, you're going to have a problem. If I take a little bitty clip, like if I took The Doors, like I talked about, and I used 58 seconds of it, probably get away with it. You can use a certain amount. I would really suggest that you try to build something of your own. So just, you know, no oversight, but copyright laws do apply. Now, when it comes to actual content, keep in mind the three keys that work for all advertising: frequency, consistency, and creativity. Frequency, the number of times it's produced or heard. You need to decide with a podcast, is this a weekly podcast? Is this a daily podcast? Is this a monthly podcast? How long is the podcast going to be? Because you also want it to be consistent. There are some people who put together a daily podcast and it lasts about 1 minute. It's very time consuming, but it's boom, they put it up. I mean, no different. Think of it as maybe some of you get a daily devotional that is downloaded onto your Bible app, and that sort of thing is brought up to you every single day. So this can be done with a podcast as well. Most of them are either weekly or monthly. Some of them, they just do them whenever they feel like doing it, and they take a long break, and you know, but it's hard to think of it as Netflix. You find a show you really like, and they have a whole season, and you binge watch it, and then they say, oh, the second season's coming sometime. But by the time they come out with it, you've completely forgotten about it. And eventually it shows up in your string, but by then it's like, yeah, that's not that interesting anymore. So you're way better off getting people into the habit of listening, getting people to know who you are, being in front of them constantly, again, so that you have that opportunity to move the ball and become their expert. When it comes to audio, by the way, it's not just expert. They've done study after study after study in radio. And I would suggest that radio was the original podcaster, because it's segmented. If you listen to stations like KTOE, there's a show that runs, or you know, Talk of the Town, I'll say, 11 o'clock today. It's from this time to this time, and there is a specific topic on this day, and then we move on. And that could be turned into its own podcast. We currently don't do that, but you know, we have little clips and bits and pieces and interviews, but it's people know when you are and how often, and have that frequency, that consistency, that creativity. So the consistency, do it forever. I do want to point out, this is not, I mean, this is difficult stuff, but keep in mind that the average podcast is under 8 episodes. 8 episodes, and they quit. Now, they may quit because they're treating it like a mini series. I said what I have to say because here's the topic. I've told the story. It's done in 8 episodes, and it's over forever. Or more likely, just talking to people. I've had some conversations with guys who do this successfully on a regular basis, and most people get bored with it. It turns out it's a lot of work. It isn't, I mean, when you look at the amount of time it takes, let's say you want to create a 20-minute podcast. Ours tend to be around 20 minutes. Our most successful one is called Surrounded by History. It is produced by the Blue Earth County Historical Society, and it's basically, it's stories about this park, this street, this exact story, this small thing that happened. You know, you ever seen those roadside signs, like, you know, those historical markers? They'll do an entire episode on one historical marker and tell the story of here's what happened there, or here's what happened in this particular park and how it got its name. And keep in mind, the rest of the world doesn't give a crap about Blue Earth County. They just don't. But for the people who live here, it's really interesting stuff to listen to. because this isn't history from a book. This is history from our hometown. And so to those people, it's wildly interesting. That's actually the first way of finding a topic, is what's called niche. You can niche a location, like surrounded by history, or you might pick something that is niche in topic. I had a conversation with the guy, his name is Robbie, and he has the most successful aquarium podcast in the nation. All he talks about is aquariums and fish plants, rocks and things. I don't get it. I will never get it. I will never tune in. Apparently, he says his formula is it's about 2/3 about aquariums and it's about 1/3 telling jokes and having fun and having a good time. But by the way, when I say he's the most successful, I said, how many people is that? And he goes, about 3,500. Is that a successful number to you? I don't know. I will tell you, if any of my radio stations had less than 3,500 people listening, I would be upset because there's like 150,000 people in the listening area. And you know, so, but on the other hand, the people who are listening to that absolutely are devoted. They love it. They are taking his advice. And there's a lot of value in that. He does it, by the way, because he loves it. And if you don't love the topic that you're picking out, I would suggest you're going to wind up in the 8-episode category. That's just the most likely thing. So niche is the first way to decide on a topic. Different is the second. It's the same content everybody else has. I'm presenting news, for example, but it's delivered in a way that's very clever. Maybe it's news in your bathrobe, news presented from the top of the Empire State Building. It's news presented, and then there's, you know, or it's presented in a way that maybe it's funny, maybe you're doing it as presented from the point of view of a Disney character. You know, there's a variety of ways to approach different, but it has to be something, and niche is probably the most popular of all the categories. Different is when you can't be the best, which is the third category. Different is kind of just try to find a clever way to present. Best is when is the final category of how do I decide on my content? I'm going to be the perceived expert in the field of choice. Now understand, if you're going to be the perceived expert in a field of choice, and there are 1.5 million podcasts out there, you better be if you're having a medical podcast, you better be a doctor or something, 30, 100 years of experience in whatever. I mean, you've got to have actual expertise. You cannot fake being the best. Now, celebrity, if there are local celebrities or regional celebrities or national celebrities, they can get away with best because there is a perception that they may know something we don't. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. But this idea of best, it's not something you can fake. Different allows you to have very similar content, but you can fake it because you're being clever and fun. Any questions on this so far? Because I think this is some pretty big, weighty stuff, deciding on topic.
Bruce, is it easier to podcast by yourself or have a partner? Or two people?
Have a partner. Have a partner. People have no idea how difficult. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. People will. I've done radio for 37 years. I was on the air for 11 of it, and I still stick my head in to talk, on the air periodically. And I got to tell you, talking to yourself in a small room for even 20 minutes is wildly difficult. It can be done, but it is not easier. And even this, because Ann, I'm grateful you left your camera on, because I will tell you, this presentation is being given to Ann. Otherwise, I'm talking to myself. And it's not an easy thing to do, because people respond to other people. Only there's 3% of our communication that is done through words. There's about another third that's done through inflection, and the rest of it is done through body language. So it's really nice, to have somebody to bounce things off of. If you are one of those people who can pull off monologue, awesome. I would say go for it, try it. I mean, and I think a lot of this it's experimentation. Not every single show you're going to do is going to be great. We tried one. We did something here for a little while prior to the pandemic. When the pandemic came, we had to change an awful lot of stuff, but we did something called Elder and Young. And I think it was a very clever idea. I was elder, and then I would find somebody younger who we would just talk about, here's differences in generations. And I mean, one of the topics I found most interesting was money. I mean, when I was a kid, we had coins that were like all silver or 90% silver. And so after 64, when they changed that, we started, like, every time you get change, you look at the edges. And I said this to this woman who's maybe 22, 23, and she's like, what would you look for the edges? What's that for? And I would describe what that was about. And it was great stories and those kinds of things. And she talked to me about cryptocurrency, which truthfully, I still don't understand. If anybody knows, I mean, I want to join in and listen to that one, just for the record. And by the way, I'm sure there is a cryptocurrency podcast I could go find that would explain everything to me, but whatever. I mean, there's literally podcasts on almost every subject.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah.
I do have a question. The comment about doing it with somebody.
Yep.
Depending on who it is, do you use the same person every time? I know, like a Joe Rogan, he always has different guests, and you always expect that. But if we were going to do something from the bank and do an investment one, would you want the same two people doing it all the time so they knew the content and the presenters would be the same? This
comes back to the Wells Fargo banker. Decide who you're going to be and then be that. It can be, the answer is yes. It can be, here's two guys who banter back and forth, and hopefully they're interesting and you don't need anybody else. And the advantage to having one person who's the expert and then a guest who comes in and another guest and another guest is that you do wind up with different points of view. Sometimes two people talking in a room can wind up in an echo chamber, and they don't really accept outside information. My guess is you said Joe Rogan,
yeah,
has people coming in because it keeps him on his toes. It makes the show more interesting. But the answer to the question is either one. I mean, there are sometimes, so I mean, think of it as if this podcast were a morning show where there's 1, 2, 3, the Power Trip morning show on KFAN is up to 8 people at one time. Sometimes there's a cast of characters, 2 or 3 that are always stable and always there. And then maybe there's some other people that come in. There's no rules to this. I mean, you can do what you want, but again, you decide what you're going to do. Put some lines on the side of the road because so that you don't wind up in the ditch. Don't just start talking and say, well, when we feel like we're done talking, we'll be done. No, decide how much time you're going to fill. This will be 20 minutes. Otherwise, you will pick up on, I mean, every topic. This is a topic that literally, I mean, you gave me 45 minutes to an hour, and it's been a half an hour already. And I'm about halfway through. I got a little more stuff in the mechanics that we can talk to, but I literally could have expanded this to 2 or 3 hours. I'll bet you there's seminars you can go to for an entire weekend to learn how to podcast. But you've really got to decide, what is the story you're trying to tell? What is the format you want to fill? How long is it going to be? Because otherwise you have to have kind of goals, program it out and decide. And make no mistake, there are lots of podcasts that just wander on, and then there are ones that have bigger audiences. And be very clear, these ones that are really, really well done, they have the rules down, they have the format down, they know exactly what they're doing. It may sound like they're being wildly spontaneous, they're not. They know what they're doing.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. And one quick thing of levity. I think my mom must have been the first podcaster because she could sit in a room for 20 minutes and talk to herself and answer. So she always had somebody with her. So.
Oh, funny. Well, I would actually suggest some of the best podcasts sound. I mean, when you listen to Talk of the Town on KTOE, what I said to Lisa when she started doing that, I said, think of it this way. You take a mic. You're going out to coffee with a good friend and you set a mic in the middle of the table and people get to listen in. It's just good conversation. I mean, some of the best podcasts are going to be just, hey, let's talk about something. Now you may cut some of the rabbit holes out and you may cut some of the dead spaces out just to confine it a little bit and bring it in on time. But, and we'll get into that a little more in mechanics, but I love the idea of human conversation. We as a population, especially in this last 6 months, are becoming more and more isolated. They knew years ago, radio stations provided friendship to people. Here's the proof of that. I was a morning guy in Grand Forks, North Dakota, newly married. So this had to be 30 years ago. And I'm walking through the mall with my brand new wife. And this couple walks up to us and they say, hey, Michael. I was Michael then. We just had a baby. It came out breech. It did this and this. And I'm like, holy crap. This is way more detail. It's really, really personal stuff that they were telling me. And I'm just like, okay, wow, glad everybody's okay. Really glad. Thanks for listening. And they wander off. And my wife's like, how come you didn't introduce me? I'm like, I don't know who they are. People assign friendship because they listen to you all the time. And as your podcast would gain popularity, people will assign friendship. They will know more about who you are when, because they're listening to you. So if you're doing it right. Now, did anybody else have a question on these first 3 points, niche, different, or best? I've got a couple other content things I want to touch on.
Bruce, Jim Gibson, I've become acquainted with you and our Mankato Rotary Club.
Yeah.
And I was particularly interested in listening to you today because I've known you. Mm-hmm. How important is knowing the podcaster to the success of the podcast?
I think it doesn't hurt. I mean, there are some times, and we've got a couple of guys on staff, they do a couple of board shifts and they actually have a pretty popular podcast. It's just local and theirs is called Do We Even Work Here? And they're just screwing around. It's whatever we feel like. It's almost a stream of it's one of those podcasts that you listen to and you'll go, well, they don't even know what they're doing. They're not even paying. They know exactly what they're doing. They've done prep on this deal. They know what things they're moving on to next, but they're having fun doing it. And they know how long it's going to last approximately. So does it help to know somebody? Yeah. The reality is people buy into the familiar. People don't talk about this, but in Google, if you Google something, let's say I just had to get a furnace, for example. You type in furnace, Mankato, Minnesota. I'll look down the list and what nobody talks about is I will click on the one that is most familiar to me. If there are none of them that are familiar to me, I'll probably take one of the top 2 or 3. They always talk about, top 2 or 3 are the most important. No, being most familiar is most important. So familiarity does absolutely matter. There are ways, by the way, of becoming familiar. You can advertise your podcast. There are a variety of platforms once you've uploaded that. Be very careful because they are not, you can dump a ton of money into this and it's a little problematic. Your ROI, make sure you know what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are, those sorts of things. A lot of people who start this, once they get into, like I say, they get to 8 episodes and they realize never has so much work gone into so few listeners. I mean, because there's so many places to go. However, Doug, you were talking about a bank. Let's say you only had 10 listeners. That would seem like a horrible waste of time, right? What if I told you one of those 10 listeners has $100 million? Suddenly, maybe it's okay. I mean, it's a matter of you gotta decide what are you trying for. So I want to talk quick about a little more on content, because we talk about niche, different, and best. This idea of mix of advice and comedy, but have stories. You can have a mix of advice and comedy. You know, that's one way. The aquarium guy does that. Or do stories with a point. Here's the thing. Facts tell. I gave you a whole bunch of facts right in the beginning of this, and it gave you some insight, but the reality is it didn't persuade you to start one or not start one. Stories are the things that sell. Let me tell you why. Let's pretend this is your brain, okay? So this is your neocortex. This is the amygdala, okay? Neocortex is responsible for things like numbers, language, music, logical thought. Amygdala is in charge of emotion. You ever have somebody walk into your office, or maybe your spouse or somebody has said something and they just set you off, and boom, you go straight red and you can hardly see straight. That's the amygdala. It's called amygdala hijack, and it absolutely shuts down everything the neocortex has going on. So they've done studies too. After somebody is injured, has an injured amygdala, for example, it's damaged, and they say to them something simple like coffee, tea, or milk. They can't make a decision. Decisions are made on emotion and justified with logic. There is a woman named Faith Harper, I'm just finishing her book, and she said, you know, the stories are the natural resting place of the brain. She's a trauma therapist, and stories are the natural resting place of the brain. She says, think of it this way. You ever drive across town and all of a sudden you look up and you go, oh, I'm here. And you were daydreaming the whole time. We've all caught ourselves doing that. We are telling ourselves stories constantly. And so stories are a natural space for us, and we learn through stories, through parables, if you want to call them that. But if you look at it, most stories have similar components. I mean, here's another way to look at it. If I walked up to a piano and I banged down on the keys, you'd go, oh, Bruce, stop making noise. But somebody walks up to that same piano and goes, do, 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 and they'll play your favorite song. And it will register immediately as, oh, I love that. I'm comfortable with that. I would suggest that there is a formula for stories as well. And here's the formula. I'm about to ruin every movie you're ever going to see, by the way. Sorry. There is a hero who has a problem. He meets a guide. The guide teaches him to transform, and then there is outcome. Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, becomes a Jedi, takes on the dark side. There's the story. Now, here's the problem where most businesses go wrong in their advertising, in their podcast, in their billboard, in their everything, is they want to step up and say, I'm the hero. No, you're never the hero. Never, ever, 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 ever do you get to be the hero. You are the guide. The person listening, the person reading, the person watching, they're the hero. If you design your podcast so that, or radio ad, or newspaper ad, website, if you are, we're here to help take care of you. We're the guide. We're going to get you through this. If you look at this as, am I the guide or the hero? And if you always answer, we are the guide, you have a better chance of success. So I just wanted to tell you that from a stories standpoint. That's really, really important. Be the guide. So any questions on stories? Okay.
I got one, Bruce.
Sure.
So when does someone have the realization maybe they're not a good storyteller? Maybe podcasting is not for them. Like, because somebody might be a good storyteller, put out a great product, but they still only have, 25 listeners. What's an indicator for self-evaluation?
Okay, number one, are you enjoying it? I know that this goes back to Tom Peters. Is what you're doing right now something you enjoy and is important? And if not, why not? I mean, life is too short. I mean, I've had people even recently say, "Oh my gosh, I want to create this feature," and they get into it a couple of months and they realize, "Oh, this isn't just super easy. This isn't always super fun. This is difficult work." And if you don't enjoy the work, number one thing, if you're not having fun at it, get out. Don't do it. I mean, the people who are really successful at doing these, they're having a great time. They're obsessed with aquariums. And I can't explain that at all, but they find the number of bubbles that pop up through the little, they find that interesting. And so number one, is it any fun? Two, number of listeners, I sometimes think I sometimes think metrics are problematic because we tend to look at it and say, well, how many people are listening to this podcast? How many people are listening to this radio station? How many people are looking at this magazine or driving by that billboard? And it fails to take into account frequency, consistency, and creativity. I'll use a billboard just because it's a departure, okay? You only get 5 words on a billboard. You only get 5 words because you're driving by, but it'll be up there for a couple of months. And if my route to work goes right by that every single day, how much I get frequency, I get consistency. If you put the right 5 words or the right picture with it or the right something, you can move my ball. And how many people, if you own a business, there's 150,000 people in the area, let's say 100,000, only because the math is easier for me. At any given time, 4% of people are in the market for any given product at any given time, only 4%. I would suggest right now it's a little bit less, and after, because of COVID, and after COVID kind of winds itself down, there will be a little bit higher number. By the way, keep in mind that right now people are making decisions of what they're going to buy and where they're going to buy it. And when they have the ability to go do it, they will. People don't understand the buying cycle, but that's a whole different speech. We'll move on. But it's important. I got to pick up where I was at. I went off on the buying cycle for a second. Don't you hate that? It's like a rabbit hole. You get this frequency, this consistency, this creativity with this billboard as you're driving by day after day. You as a business don't need the 4%, 4,000 people walking through your door today. If you had 4,000 people walk through your door today, you'd freak out. You would have, I mean, you probably only need, if you had 10 people walk through your door or 20, because based on that billboard or whatever, you'd go, wow, that was a good day. That was all right. It also depends on what your margins are. It depends on how often the product cycle is. I mean, mattresses, you make, that's every 7 to 10 years, and McDonald's or some form of food, that's once every 6 hours. So, you know, you get, it varies. You got to decide, what do you want out of it? I mean, that's how, one of the ways too, that you know whether you need to move on. Be careful of metrics. If you've got the right 10 people, this might be the most successful podcast in the history of the planet. If you just want a local audience, this you know how to get the word out. You can actually talk to people. You can get feedback on them from them. But I think you've got to decide for yourself what success is. From the standpoint of being a storyteller, if you're not a storyteller, my gut feeling is, in this particular format, I think, boy, you're going to have a really tough go. Here, maybe I like to tell stories. I think stories are awesome. They're a lot of fun. Talking doesn't come difficult to me. Is there anybody here who's a graphic designer? Anybody knows graphic design?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. So here's the deal. I couldn't design. I mean, I'm a horrible graphic designer, just awful at it. I can, if you give me 3 ads, I go, yeah, I kind of like that one or that one. Well, pick one. You tell me which one's best. I'm not good at it. If that was what I had to do, I would be, 1, I would be miserable, and 2, I would want to move on as quickly as possible. I mean, so it is really, you want to work to your strengths. One thing you might consider, I mean, because there are people who set up either Facebook Live or a recorder, and they will record as they're recording their podcast. So they're recording in 2 different ways. One, to an audio thing, which we'll get to the mechanics here, which I actually find the mechanics to be the most boring part of this, but whatever. They will record the video version of it to upload to YouTube while they're also uploading to their SoundCloud or their, whatever format they're using. So, questions on that?
Yes, I have a quick question, sort of related to that. So, so tell me if I already forgot the stat on how many podcasts there are out there, but I'll say there's a zillion. There's a zillion podcasts to choose from, and try to figure out what you want to listen to as a listener. As a podcaster, how do you build that audience, and how do you know that they're even there, or that they want to hear from our business? I don't want to just spend all this time producing something and have it just go to blank air, even though I've really advertised it to folks on social media and out and about, that sort of thing. So I guess, how do you build an audience as quickly as possible so you feel like it's been kind of worth your time?
God, and this is the part where I don't want to be disparaging to podcasting. I actually think there are some really interesting things, and I do listen to some podcasts. There's only about 1/3 of people who even finish any podcast they start. What's even more dismal is 80% of books that are published and purchased at a store or given as a gift, 80% of them go unread. I know I've got at least 6 sitting on my coffee table right now at home going, I want to read that book. And I haven't read that. I mean, it's, people consume media as they consume media. And it's, so there's a lot of this that it is really difficult to come up with. There's 1.5, by the way, million podcasts. I think part of it has to do with tagging, because when I go in and I start looking for a podcast, a lot of times I'll go to my phone. I have a couple of different I use Castbox is one of the things I like, and I just I may put in Mankato, and I'll see, well, what local podcasts are there? I may put in home improvement, which is something I enjoy doing. So the words you use to identify this podcast, maybe it's parenting, maybe it's banking, maybe it's finance, and you've got to have a number of words in there so that when people are searching for it within the app, that they can find you. I think using your own social media to press things out is valuable. If you are doing other advertising, if you're already going to be on the radio, be in, on television, if you're going to be in the newspaper or on a billboard, there's nothing wrong with putting, hey, check out our podcast, something that lets people know that it exists. This is one of the, it's still really early on in podcasting. It's been around since 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there. It hasn't really caught on. And from the standpoint of massive amounts of people listening, yes, 44% of people have listened, but it's that 4% of ear that they currently are sharing. Give me 1 second. Sorry. I don't usually talk this much all in a row. I like to ask questions and listen too. Does that kind of answer your question? How do you get it out there?
Yep, that helps. Thanks.
I know a lot of some of the podcasts I follow. I also I have wound up following. They've created their own social media for that particular podcast, and I will follow that, and that helps keep things up. It is a little more social. A lot of it is friendships. We actually had an intern here on staff pre-COVID, and she did a parenting podcast, which was actually kind of interesting. I had some problems with her mechanics, which I'll talk about here why don't I do that now since I got officially 10 minutes left? I want to be respectful of time. So things you're going to need in order to pull this off. You need a mic that plugs into your laptop or your computer, USB mic. Typically, you can get really expensive mics. You can get lower end mics, but a microphone. You'll need a laptop. You'll need recording software, Audacity. I use Adobe, which is I tend to like Adobe products, but there are literally dozens of free recording software pieces out there. I mean, just go Google free recording software and you'll be able to find some software that works for you, and try a few out. They have actually made improvements in the last 2 years since I went looking. 2 years ago, it was pretty bleak. And now that I'm finding some things that I'm like, that's a pretty decent thing. Most of them will do way more than you want them to do, but that's okay. I do want to warn you about simple mic technique. Let's say this is my mic, okay? People have it in their head that if they're holding a mic, that they are using a mic, okay? And they'll watch the pen, right? They'll do this while they're talking, and you'll hear every bit of that, okay? Keep in mind, there's a couple of ways you can get a farther away, gives you a whole room feel. It'll almost sound like you're talking more in a bathroom, kind of a wider feel, but there are times where that makes sense. And both people, somebody sitting across me would be talking from the other side, and we're both using the same mic. That's one mic technique. I personally don't like it. I think that it has limited availability. I would rather have two mics, and I would rather have close proximity mics. It sounds much more intimate. It sounds much more a personal feeling. You're also able to back away when you laugh a little bit, and it gives you a little more control. So mic technique, you're going to want to be pretty tight on your mics when you're doing this. Just be aware of that. Because again, if you're holding on to the mic, and if you do this, if you're holding on to a mic and you can't keep it right here, then get a mic stand or something and make it so that it can't move. It takes a little bit of practice, because there'll be that tendency to do this as well. You'll be talking away and, oh yeah, and we still think that this is a great idea. And the sound's going that way now and the mic's still over here, and it will sound completely different. You'll have to play and listen back to your stuff. So once you record something, you press record in your audio software, you record it all in, you put your 20 minutes or hour or 1 minute, whatever it is. You're going to save that as typically an MP3, but there are literally 250 file formats. And if any of you are audiophiles and want to argue the value of it, let's not. I mean, I can tell you, yes, there are file formats that are far better than MP3. There's not even a question. However, it's widely accepted. It's easy to come up with, and it's easy to use and easy to email. So MP3 is still, for most industries, a pretty decent standard. Then you upload it to so you've created this, you want to edit out things. Make sure you listen back to your whole podcast when it's done. Maybe you want an intro on it, maybe you want an outro on it, but listen to the whole thing, because I guarantee you somewhere in there is a mistake that you do not want on the air. And if you listen to it, a lot of times I will download it as an MP3, put it on my phone like it's a song, and then jump in my car and listen to it on the way home. I have about a 15-minute ride home, and if it's a 20-minute podcast, I just go around the block a couple more times, listen to the whole thing as if I'm a listener, hearing it for the first time. Suddenly you go, oops, I just repeated one whole phrase there because I had made a mistake. I stopped and then restarted. And you can do that because you can edit pieces out. Editing, video or audio editing is really fabulous. I mean, it's remarkable. People have it in their head that disc jockeys just come in here and they, talk and it's all done and they get it done in 30 seconds. It's like, no, the reality is we do things 2 and 3 and 4 times as well. I mean, we do it until it's right. So oftentimes we'll have mistakes in things and then edit it clean. Once you have that full file the way you want it, here's my show, I'm going to upload it. You're going to upload it to accounts like Buzzsprout, Podbean, which is apparently pretty popular, Simplecast, Castos, Fusebox, Google Podcast. Here at the office, we use Mixcloud and SoundCloud. I can't tell you why. I mean, there's some, a lot of it's going to be personal preference and what do you like. Go ahead and get it uploaded. You'll need to have an account there. Once you have it, they will then say, hey, do you want to publicize this? And they will ask you for real money in order to put it out and get it advertised on podcasts. So there's your podcast service, and they can prioritize yours. Be very, very careful with this. SEO, there's SEO things that apply too. And just be very, very careful. You can spend a ton of money for not as big a return as you imagine. It may be, by the way, I'll go back to Jessica's question of how do I get this out there? If any of you have email lists, I'm a big fan of email. I think radio and billboards and email and all of these things all work together. But I have seen over and over where if you have a well-timed, well thought out, well-produced email, think of it planting and harvesting. Podcast is about planting, okay? Sorry, my phone rings all day long. I should have just shut it off. Anyway, podcasting can be about planting seeds, getting people to know. Email is about harvesting, and it's about getting people to actually take action. You can take the URL link from this podcast, put it into an email, or if you have an email newsletter or a regular newsletter, you can drive people to that using your newsletters. Again, all things work together. So we talked about the video. You can post that YouTube or video. Monetization. I will tell you, it's difficult to make a really, really great living at this yet. They haven't figured it out, but there's 3 key ways that seem to come up. One of them is something Doug alluded to, be the expert in your field, that this podcast is designed to make me the expert so people will come in and do business with me. I am my own commercial. By the way, if you make it entirely an infomercial talking about your products, your daily life, chances are it's going to be short-lived. You may have some people visit, but people are far less interested in you as the hero than you as here's things you can do. Now, I mean, if you can teach me how to use cryptocurrency, okay, I'm interested in that. To hear you just tell me what you've done with cryptocurrency, I don't really care. That's you. I'm sorry, I'm self-centered that way. It's like everybody is. So become your own expert. One of them that is I'm seeing a little bit of is what's called embedded ads, or some people are calling these natural ads. So somewhere during it, maybe it's you and your banker friend are having hey, I'm going to stop to drink my Caribou coffee tea today. By the way, Caribou has a really great special. You should try the whatever, and they pay you for that. You're not going to make a ton, and but it's that natural content. Hard to find sponsors. I've seen a few. They tend to be just thrown in almost as natural conversation. It's interesting. And the third is more of a traditional, where you can, actually place things prior, before and after, or in the middle. Hey, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. And you placed an ad. That is not common at all. So that's the bulk of it. I mean, are there questions in regard to mechanics, or is there some part of it you want to revisit?
How cheap is too cheap for equipment, like microphones, headphones, things like that?
Headphones, I mean, there are some people who are headphone prudes. I'm not. I'll take anything that makes some form of noise. Microphones, I actually am much more of a, I could give you names of things. They're if you watch some of the really good podcasts, they're using stuff we don't even use. I mean, we broadcast 24 hours a day, and some of these guys are using stuff that's just amazing. It will hear, a mouse whisper from across the room. I tend to think if it's $25, that may be a little too, you do get what you pay for in audio. I think a lot of it too, I would read some reviews. Do you want condenser? Do you want, do you want the whole room mic? You got to kind of do a little bit of research and decide what format what sound are you going for? Do you want it to have this, like, let's say it's a parenting podcast, and you're going to let your kids run around in the background and make noise and interrupt you while you're doing it. That's the sound we want because it's real life. Well, then you're going to want a mic that picks up more of the room, because some of these mics, I mean, literally, I'm here and it will hear me, and I'm here and it will not. I mean, they are that tight in. So you got to do some research and decide what it is you're trying to do. And I hate to say it, but there's a certain amount of experimentation. Start with probably that $50 to $75 mic makes sense to me. The really cheap ones, you do get what you pay for. I have also seen MP3 recorders, an H2 Zoom you can get for about $60 used. There's an H4 Zoom now as well. There's something called a Yellowtail, I don't know. I really liked using it. It was a very heavy handheld thing, and it was a mic and an MP3 recorder all in one. So and then you just plug it into your computer to download the audio, and you mix from there. We use that, for example, an H2 Zoom. If we're going on location during COVID here, we've had a hard time getting people to record ads. We can't have them come in. So we go to them with an H2 Zoom, and it looks like a razor. I don't have it here today. One of the announcers took it with him. It kind of looks like this, and they hold it about here, and you can record it. And it sounds, audio quality is awesome. So, I mean, there's a variety of different ways you can approach that. H2 Zoom also has it has mics on both sides. It was designed for musicians. Pay attention to what musicians are buying, by the way, too. A lot of that works well but in the beginning, I would be cautious about how much money you spend. I mean, people will ask, well, how much does it cost to set up a studio? I mean, when I started this 37 years ago, a studio was going to be 10 to 12 grand minimum. That was just how it was going to be. Now I realistically could set up a really nice studio in my house for 2 to 3 grand. I mean, full on. I mean, but you could set up a podcast studio for probably, I mean, assuming you're spending $1,000 on a laptop, under 2 grand. I mean, it really, and that's, you're buying software. I mean, it's affordable. I mean, it never has the playing field been so level for producing content. Some people in radio have been, they're afraid of that. I personally think it's incredibly healthy, because this is an incredible way to find new talent. It's a great place to discover talented people. I mean, we actually have people on our air with us who we just found in the community. They have real day jobs. They hang out with us for a few hours a day, and then they go off to their real job, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, you get different perspectives. So
hey, Bruce, I apologize. I missed a little bit with another meeting, but did you talk about video podcasts versus just listening podcasts?
I most of the time there are what's called a vlog or a video. I tend, the ones I'm seeing, if that are true podcasters who are going to upload this to a podcast, all they're doing is they're turning on a phone in the background, or whether it be Facebook Live or whether it be video that they can then upload to YouTube. They're doing it in that way. Okay. There are people who are doing the full-on video, but that tends to be a different. You're going to want different servers, and I know very little about video blogging. I mean, that one is not, when it comes to, as I told Jessica, it's like when it comes to things that are not audio oriented, I am not as strong. I used to work with TV guys. A guy's name was Joe, and he was the local news anchor for years and years up in Alexandria, Minnesota. And that man could come up with sight gags like you wouldn't believe. He just thought in television, and I thought in audio, and the two of us would get together, and we had a lot of fun. Because he could figure out how to take an audio thing and turn it into a video, or a sight thing. I mean, I recognize, when somebody's done it well, but it's coming up with that on my own. I don't want to speak to that. So.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other questions from anybody on anything?
This is Jessica again. Can you give an example of like, other than the Blue Earth County Historical Society one that you mentioned, of some smaller local businesses who decided to do not blogs. Wow, please, what am I in? I was thinking vlogs when they started talking about video, podcasts, and small businesses in the area that have started it, taken it on. It's been a success for them, and they've seen positive results.
This is one of my, I appreciate your asking this question. This is one of, whenever I have a vendor come to me, this is one of the questions I like to ask. Who else is doing this, and are they successful at it? I cannot name one. I'm sorry. I do not have anybody who, now that does not mean it won't happen, but I will tell you, it takes a very, there are local podcasts. I'm aware of only about 4 or 5. We produce only a couple. Is it driving? But then the question is it driving business? I don't have proof of that. Do they love doing it? Absolutely. And I do think when you love doing something, because here's the other thing, you can use your podcast as a tool. If you've ever been in front of a client, and I produced a video, I will take this back. I did produce a video podcast, or it was called The Kitchen. It's on radiomankato.com if you go there. And it was just from my actual kitchen, and it was about marketing. And I only did about 5 of them because it's really hard to do. and do I know whether it helped our business or not? I don't know, but it does allow me, when I'm having a conversation like this and somebody says, well, what does radio actually do? Or how does marketing work? I said, you know what? If you're interested, you can go to radiomankato.com, click down to insights and click on that button, and you'll find something called The Kitchen. And I just do a quick video. You can watch it. They're about 2.5, 3 minutes long. And so it allows you something that in the sales process, you can refer them to. And to me, the advantage of that is when you give a client homework, if they do it, it's a buying signal. And if they don't do it, it's also a signal. So if the next time you talk, it's like, oh my gosh, I listened to your podcast and I love that. And they describe, here's what you talked about. I think it could have value in that regard as well. I mean, Doug had talked about something in regard to banking. I mean, I wonder if you were to use this and you really segmented these out rather than try to deal with, here's everything that's going on today. It's like, the proper way to do a checking account. My kids, and this just frustrates me no end, do not balance their checkbooks. They don't even have registers. Do they even sell registers anymore? And I'm like, how do you know how much money you have? Well, we go online. It says right there. How do you know if that's the right number? I mean, it just makes me crazy. But there's a place for that. And it would be an interesting, so if you could drill down to that exact topic, then when somebody says, well, do you need to balance your checkbook anymore? You say, we did a podcast on that. You could listen. There's the pros and the cons, and here's what you want to do. And it really, I'm coming to the arguing this through with my now grown children. They're like, hey, it's all personal. It's what you're comfortable with, and I'm more comfortable with knowing how much money I have. Imagine that. Does that help? I mean, again, I don't have anybody that I can point to and say, Joe's Pharmacy is doing this and they've seen 37 new customers because no. Do I think people do listen? Yes, they consume this information. I think a lot of it is for entertainment and knowledge. One of the stats I ran across of who's listening, people who are high school graduates or less, or have 1 to 3 years of college or less, listen to podcasts more than college graduates and doctoral. I found that really interesting. That I don't want to say undereducated but that's the only gauge I've got to call it by. So but these people are looking for self-knowledge, and I mean it was like 4 or 5 percentage points more. That they were listening to podcasts more than people. And it might be that these people who are doctors already feel like they are the experts and should be doing the podcast. So why should I listen to one? different point of view. I don't know the exact, I'm making some assumptions there. Hope that helps. Any other questions? Well, I hope this has been helpful. And I hope it hasn't been disparaging either, because I don't want you to feel like, oh, this is a bad idea. I actually think, if I didn't think it was a good idea, we wouldn't be producing them too. I do think there is a place for this. I would like to see us expand our offerings. If somebody has ideas for some, I'm willing to listen to that. But I think there are some problematic, things with it too. And I'd rather paint a real picture. I'm kind of a realist that way. If here's what's possible, here's what's not. So
I don't think it was disparaging at all, Bruce. I think it was good to hear that, I think people maybe don't start podcasts because they're like, well, I'm never going to be as big as Joe Rogan or the Office Ladies,
right,
or, the Power Trip, even state
right.
level. But just to know that even if you get some people who listen, enjoy the content, and you enjoy doing it, you can count that as success.
As I used, the idea of a banking, it's like maybe you only have 10 people listening, but if one of them has $100 million, I will call that successful. If you persuade, and it depends on what you're trying to do. A lot of people aren't trying to persuade anybody. They're just having fun. I really think that's a big part of the podcast thing. You have to want to do it, because I will tell you, it's a lot of work to produce 20 minutes of audio once a week. It sounds like, oh, it's only 20 minutes. No, realistically, that 20-minute episode, by the time you finish editing it, listening to it a couple of times to get all the things fixed, it's going to be 1.5 hours to 2 hours minimum. And it's not hard to lose 3. So, just know that it takes time. So, I am sure that there are probably people out there who would do it for you. Like, here's our rough stuff and you edit it into place. That's also possible. It probably won't be cheap, but
we really appreciate you coming today, Bruce. This was good.
Absolutely. This is entertaining. Yeah. I do find it a genuinely interesting topic, and it is growing. Know that when I say 44% are listening now, if you look at that just 10 years ago, it was like none. It was so it's growing quickly. So we'll see where it goes.
Good, awesome. If people have questions off this meeting, they can shoot you an email over at Radio Mankato.
You bet. It's B McKirdy. Maybe you can see my name there on the thing. But it's just B McKirdy at radiomankato.com. I'd be happy to chat with any of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Uh-oh. Mine has locked up.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
I can't tell whether you guys can hear me or not.
You're locked up there, Bruce. We're going to have Jim Borboom from Best of Waseca County. He's going to talk to us a little bit about Vision 2030, Waseca Vision 2030, and where we're at. You're welcome to stay on, or if you have to
there it is. There it is. Now you're back. Okay.
All right.
My internet just locked up, and you guys were gone for quite a while. So
that's all right. You are welcome to stay on.
What were you saying?
We're going to have Jim Borboom from Best of Waseca County talk about Waseca Vision 2030. You're welcome to stay on, but if you have to hop off, that's okay too.
Okay. Well, good morning, Ann, and thank you for the invitation to talk about Best of Waseca. I just want to begin by saying both to Ann and Doug, I really appreciate the program this morning. I think it was an excellent program. I learned a lot about Yelp, and I learned a lot about podcasting. And with today's environment with COVID-19, that certainly, I think some of those are some excellent resources. So thanks for putting that together. I'm also happy to see on this call, or in this meeting, there are 4 best board members, a couple of best advisors, and a former board member. So I think the participants in this meeting certainly are well aware of best, but Doug did ask me or invited me to talk about what we've done over the past year and then do a quick look ahead in 2021 about some of the work that we'll be doing. And I'm happy to share that. But I'd like to begin just a bit about the organization. It was actually chartered in 2003 It's a nonprofit organization, and it was chartered at that time to essentially build the water park in town. It was a capital campaign to build a water park, and that was a very successful venture. And after that was accomplished, then the board decided, whether we should continue or not. And I'm thankful that they do continue, because that 501c3 status is certainly a big resource or an asset to this community. Some other work that has been done, we've been the fiscal agent for the renovation of the baseball stadium in town, and most recently, the Veterans Memorial. So I really appreciate some of the previous work a lot of our board members have done on those two projects. But our purpose, quite honestly, and I'll just read a couple of key words that are included in our articles of incorporation, shall be operated to advance causes and projects and the possible funding of projects for the betterment of our Waseca community. And that's really why we exist. And I think that's one of the things that I'm happy to talk about as we look ahead. This last year been a very different year for us, like many of you. We began the year with some ideas around what can we do to help new businesses, new entrepreneurs. We also talked about ways, how do we reach out and strengthen the relationships with some of our regional partners. And then third, we wanted to continue to work and advance with Waseca Vision 2030. Some of the things that we've done around support for businesses and new entrepreneurs is we did essentially create or establish a business recovery team. This is a kind of an initial effort of about 6 or 7 volunteers that are existing business owners that are available on call to help new business say, what can I do to recover from COVID-19, or just some of the new plans that they're making. This was a similar effort that was done in Traverse City, Michigan. And I think the only model I can compare it to in Minnesota is back in the 90s, there was a statewide effort called Dairy Diagnostic Teams. It was teams of individuals that are available to work with dairy farmers. But so that's one thing we did accomplish. Some examples of the partners that we're working with is Minnesota State University, Green Seam, also Southern Minnesota Initiative. So those are some of the things that we worked on last year. We suspended our meetings in the spring of 2020 due to COVID-19. We did reconvene then again in June with a Zoom meeting, and then in August we reconvened, thankfully, at the Public Safety Building, and I appreciate the chance to be at that facility because we were able to meet in person and still comply with social distance requirements, and it's been a really great facility. But one of the 2 initiatives that we're working on and will be working on in 2021. And the first one is to advance Waseca Vision 2030, and I'll talk more about that later. But then the second one is to partner with Lead for Minnesota. Lead for Minnesota is an initiative founded by Benya Kraus. Benya is the executive director of Lead for Minnesota. She's got 3 other staff people that are working in this community, and she's got an individual that is a fellow for working in this community, and that is Sophia Hoyseth. But really what Lead for Minnesota is doing is they're developing emerging leaders to help revitalize our communities. And they're encouraging those leaders to come from those communities, from our own communities. And I think the result of this will be a much more dynamic, diverse group of leaders with the talent to tackle some of the problems or the challenges that we have in our communities. I'm going to go back to Waseca Vision 2030 and then talk more about what we're doing with Lead for Minnesota. Vision 2030, as many of you know, was published in 2018, and it's all about saying what is our preferred future for this community. It really is about 4 conditions that should exist in order to create that preferred future. One is to create a vibrant, dynamic community, create high quality assets, strengthen regional connectivity, and expand and leverage economic development. And there are 4 strategic action teams or action teams that are working to support those different outcomes. Sophia Hoyseth is, again, the Lead for Minnesota Fellow. She is right now facilitating and coordinating and working with those teams. And I know that she's done a lot of outreach to some new members through the use of Facebook. And I'm really pleased to have her as part of our talent in this community. Just a little bit about Sophia. She is a graduate of Minnesota State University, where she majored in political science and nonprofit leadership. So she's got a great talent and great energy. If you haven't met her, I hope you have a chance to do that. Looking ahead, right now we're working with the Office of Strategic Partnership at Minnesota State University Mankato. They in turn executed a contract with a consultant team out of the University of Northern Iowa called the Institute for Decision Making. And tomorrow night, I'm happy to say that from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 6:30, I'd like to invite all of you to the mill to have a celebration of what we've accomplished under Waseca Vision 2030, but also to hear from you as to what else should we be doing. And this team, the consultant team from the University of Northern Iowa, will essentially walk us through a process to inventory what we've accomplished, and then look at some gaps that we might need to fill or work on. And based on an inventory and a map of the work we've done under Waseca Vision 2030, then we can move forward to say who else needs to be involved and what talent and what resources can they bring to this effort. And so I'm looking forward to that event. And then again, and that's tomorrow night at the mill from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 6:30. And I've talked to Oscars, and they'll have some light refreshments. And if you've been to the mill, you'll enjoy a nice evening. And it's an opportunity to gather to see what we've accomplished as a community around 2030. One of the other things I want to just shout out with the work that Lead for Minnesota is doing. If you haven't met Benya Kraus, I would certainly, as you go to some event, reach out and get to know her. She is a founder and director of Lead for Minnesota. Her dad was a long-term employee at the United Nations, and they also elected to serve or reside in our Mankato-Waseca area. But in a conversation with Benya about maybe a month ago, she said, well, Bess has done the work and they've done a water park and, you know, we've done a baseball stadium. Can you be part of an effort to help build an innovation hub? And I said, yes, absolutely. And this innovation hub is really inspired by the Center of Rural Innovation, which helps small towns kind of build future-oriented economies. And we're talking about an economy based on arts and culture, entrepreneurship, workforce training, housing for young professionals, higher education, broadband access. And there's some of us on the call, Teresa, Bob, and myself. We did a tour this past Saturday and saw some examples of other communities that are working on similar initiatives around an innovation hub. And so one of our primary efforts this next year will be, again, being a partnership with Lead for Minnesota to realize this innovation hub, and then secondly, do more work on Waseca Vision 2030. I'm really pleased that this community, 3-4 years ago, said that we want to engage in defining a preferred future. There's a great participation and outreach, and we need to have, kind of that same effort around now taking action on that. So again, the Innovation Hub is something that with Lead for Minnesota's lead effort, will be a fiscal agent to help with that project. And the board did approve a motion back in September to promote and help administer the funding of $300,000 for the innovation, or essentially the rehab a vacant commercial building. There are other monies coming from other sources, but the $300,000 would be essentially for renovation type work. So again, we're looking at 2 projects or 2 priorities this coming year, Vision 2030, and partnering with Lead for Minnesota. So thanks again for the chance to share our work, and happy to take any questions.
Jim, there's going to be a Zoom option for the event tomorrow night too, correct?
Yes, there is. And I think if you look on if you should have gotten maybe an invitation on this, but there is an option on the invitation to participate either in Zoom or as an in-person, but thanks for asking.
Perfect.
And you'd like, Jim, if people want to show up at the mill, you'd like them to at least let you know so you know the numbers they'll have?
That would be great, Doug. We've got probably 20 people that have indicated an interest. I'd like to see 30 people there would be a good number. If we had 30 or more, I'd be happy with that. And again, I know there will be another group of people participating online.
Sounds good. Thanks for all that you do, Jim, with Best and kind of moving Best forward in a new direction. And we appreciate all the work you've done and being here today to present.
Thank you much.
Yeah, thanks for everybody showing up today. And like I said, we recorded this, so we will put it on the Chamber's YouTube channel. And I think it'll be the second video that we have on our YouTube channel. So, and then we'll post it on social media for people to view. This has been great. Really appreciate everybody's participation today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.